Good afternoon, friends. Let's welcome CA Karun Nagpalji, today's faculty, and it is fortunate that we have tomorrow faculty CA Chandni Gupta is also here. Welcome to both of you. Karunji, namaskar.
Namaskar, Sumitji.
And today's important topic, as we all know, regarding this fair value measurement Ind AS 113. This is our 7th master class on Ind AS. So today we will try to cover the fair value measurement, recognition and measure disclosure principle, along with emerging valuation opportunities and COVID impact on the fair value reporting. So Karunji will deliberate on this topic. Members, you all are requested to post your query in the last so that we can cover the session very well. Thereafter, we will try to cover maximum queries. Chandni ji will take care of everything. And about Karun Nagpal ji, he is a practicing professional and having more than 10-year experience post qualification. Currently, he is practicing in Chandigarh. So first of all, I welcome Karunji once again in this Team Casa YouTube channel. First time I think he's delivering any webinar in our platform. So welcome Karun bhai once again.
Thank you.
Over to you, Karunji.
Thank you, Sumitji. So first of all, I would like to thank Team Casa and Sumitji for providing me opportunity to speak in this forum and share my experience and knowledge. So without wasting much time, I would, because the topic is vast and I doubt I may be able to cover entire FAS 115 COVID impact and all in 1 hour. So I am quickly sharing my screen. Sumitji, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, Karunji, yes.
Okay. So friends, let us start
with... You can enlarge the screen.
Oh, yeah, sure. Is it fine now?
Yes.
Okay. So fair value measurement, this is not something new for the entire world. For India, it is something new. It's been a couple of years in India, it is notified through Ind AS 113 and through also in phased manner. Initially, it got applied to the listed companies and the companies with net worth having more than 500 crore, and now with the companies having net worth for 250 crore plus have to follow this Ind AS. And Sumoto also company can adopt this fair value measurement standard. So in US, it developed sometime during subprime crisis, sometime in 2007-8 through FAS 157, and later on it got amended and updated through ASC 820, and then in 2011 again ASU 2011-04 came in, and in 2013 through IFRS 13 they notified it, and internationally, and India has got the convergence from IFRS 13. In India we have Ind AS 113, right? So first of all, let us understand what is the need for this standard. this standard historically we were showing in our books of accounts, we were showing the assets and liabilities at historical cost. So what I have purchased 10 years back may not be relevant for today, right? That is why this standard says we need to do fair value to report the assets and liability at the date of reporting. So my presentation, I have divided my presentation in two parts. First of all, I will be talking about the introduction, valuation in India, about Indian valuation standard issued by ICAI. What is the requirement for valuation requirement, scenarios where valuation is required, valuation premise, and emerging opportunities for professional in this domain. Then second part, I will be talking about the fair value measurement definition, fair value hierarchy, valuation approaches, valuation adjustment, disclosure requirement. I'll be walking you through the practical disclosure in the financial statements. And finally, we will talk about the COVID impact on financial reporting. I would not be spending much time on first part. I will be spending 10 to 15 minutes on first part. Rest 45 minutes, we will talk about the fair value measurement. So this is a nice quote from Warren Buffett. As you all know, price is what you pay, value is what you get. So you may be able to differentiate between the value and the price. Suppose you have purchased something for X price because you are willing to buy that at a certain price. That is user specific price. That is why price may not be same as the value. Another quote from Carl Manger, he is an Australian economist. Value is nothing inherent in goods, no property of them, nor an independent thing existing by itself. Now you may be able to, by going through these definitions, value is something different from the price, right? You may be able to relate. Now, value and price, in the perfect market scenario, value will be equal to price, but that is hypothetical situation. So price indicates the amount at which particular asset is bought and sold in the market. Value indicates the worth of an asset in normal circumstances. Market discovers the price, right? And value of property does not always correspond to the price. You purchase something, you may not be able to sell that back at the same price. So value may be different from the price. Your initial outgo, what you have spent, you may not be able to recover that at all. It discovered different prices for same asset in different contexts and different point of time. So this situation you will be able to relate at this point of time, because we are into COVID pandemic, and you may notice that medical supply prices are going up, and the automobile, hotel fare, crude prices are going down. So that is context specific and point specific, scenario specific. So price is different from value. So very nicely drafted definition of valuation from International Valuation Standard Council. It says valuation is the process of determining economic worth of an asset or a company. Under certain assumption. We will talk about all the assumptions and limiting conditions, and subject to data available on the valuation date, right? That is date specific. Valuation should be on a particular date. For example, LIC got valued sometime in December and January for 10 lakh crore before its IPO, and now you can imagine that valuation has gone down. So valuation as of that date was different, and if I do the valuation for LIC as of today, it will be different. So it is date specific, right? We will be talking about this definition. This definition will get covered during my coming slides. So now, first of all, let us talk about the requirement for valuation. Valuation, this is not an exhaustive list. These are just an illustrative list. There may be other circumstances also where valuation is required. So valuation is required for regulatory purposes. For example, under RBI, FEMA, income tax under Rule 11 UA, under SEBI, Companies Act and Insolvency. For Companies Act and Insolvency, currently a registered valuer can do a valuation. Under business restructuring, sale, purchase of business, merger, fundraising, acquisition, business combination, disc ops. So endless scenarios where valuation may be required. For financial reporting purposes, for purchase price allocation in case of business combination or acquisitions, portfolio valuation, fair value reporting. For impairment testing, there is separate standard IS 34 which talks about impairment, recoverable amount, and also there also we need value in use and fair value, less cost to sell. So valuation is required. For ESOP, valuation is in case company is willing to issue stock to its employee. In case of litigation or family settlement also. There are other acts also, such as Banking Regulation Act, Black Money Act, Money Laundering Act, Security Control Regulation Act, where valuation is required. So this is just an illustrative list, right? Then let's talk about valuation in India, how it is driving and how it is emerging, and in times to come, how I see it as an emerging opportunity for professionals. So currently, what is valuation? Valuation is driven from the demand side, not from the supply side. What does that mean? For valuing a property, real estate, valuer has to register with institution of valuer, or with bank. He has to empanel with the bank to value that property. A chartered accountant can do valuation. A merchant banker can do valuation under Income Tax Act. A registered valuer can. So it is spread. No proper statute or institutional framework is there which is regulating the valuation in India right now. However, we have a long history, but no statute is there for banking, security, tax, companies, insolvency. So every act requires valuation, and all these acts are working in isolation. So in the past also, government has tried to have a framework during 2008. So they come up with the draft valuation professional bill, but that could not reach parliament and could not become an act. In these institutions, our ICAI also have tried to have the build the valuation, but they have a committee that is regulating the valuation for chartered accountant. But since they were not driven by the statute, so they were not able to implement that completely thoroughly for all the professionals. Recently, registered valuer and valuation rule 2017 came in, and so they came up with the centralized framework for valuation, but that was only limited to insolvency and bankruptcy code and companies act. So there are around 3,000 plus valuers who are registered under these rules, and in the future they are trying to have altogether fresh institution for controlling these valuers. Now, opportunity. I see that there is an enormous opportunity in this field. So professionals can do right now with who have 3+ years of experience into financial reporting, modeling, or similar field financial operations. They can, after pursuing this 50 hours of training with RVO, Registered Valuer Organization, ICAI also have a Registered Valuer Organization, and they can clear the IBPI exam and become the registered valuer. Once the this institutional framework will come in, so the government has already prepared the draft valuer bill 2020, and had we been not facing the COVID crisis, we could have seen that bill could have approved in the parliament in this summer session or maybe monsoon session. That could have become bill act. So going forward, what they are planning to have, only the valuers registered with National Institute of Valuers can do valuation and can sign the valuation report. So even a chartered accountant, merchant banker, they would not be able to sign the report. So they wanted to have a full-fledged profession, valuation profession, similar to doctors and CAs. So for initial 2-3 years, this Valuers Bill 2020 will allow specified professionals, people with specified qualification to enter this profession by completing specified hours of training. So they say at least it should be at least 400 hours. So maybe when they notify, they may come up with 500 hours. So and clear the limited valuation examination. So they are still in the draft. They are giving opportunity for professionals to enter into this profession initially, because as per the draft, they say they need at least 2 lakh valuers for all the category, for land and building, plant and machinery, and for securities and financial assets. So right now, if you plan to do a valuation course, that is pretty easy. Just 50 hours of training and clear the IBBI examination. And later on, it will become a 2-year comprehensive course. Even if you are a chartered accountant and you want to, in future, you want to pursue valuation profession, you would have to undergo 2 hours. 1 year will be full-time residential program, and then 1 year for internship. So that was all about valuation. ICAI valuation standard. ICAI have issued around 8 valuation standard. So most of them will covered in my presentation itself. However, these are issued by ICAI. I am talking about Ind AS, but most of them will covered. Only the report and documentation, business valuation, and intangibles I would not be talking about. So let us start with the valuation premise. So these are the valuation premise. Different authors have defined differently, different way, but in total these are 5. Some say 2 valuation premise, and they have further categories in it. So first one is highest and the best use. This is the basis for fair value measurement standard. This standard, highest and the best use. What does that mean? Suppose you have a factory and you are utilizing only the 50 or 60% of its capacity, and rest 40% is for the timing is idle, and you have planned to expand your operations. So you, while valuing your factory, suppose you are using the income approach, we will talk about that later. So you are valuing the factory, so you will take into account that your 100% occupancy is there, and you will discount that using that in future, because you are planning to expand in future, and that is why you will take into account the entire factory, not just the 60% of its capacity currently being utilized. We will talk about highest and the best use in detail in my coming slides. Then going concern, I think you all understand going concern, we see foreseeable future. So for n number of years, we do discounting. As is, where is basis. For example, bank, in case an individual has not paid EMI for home loan, so what bank will do? Bank will repossess the asset, repossess the flat. Suppose in case he has purchased the flat on EMI. Now that asset, bank will not invest further in that particular flat to make it fit for use. So bank will dispose of that asset, because the bank's intention is to recover the amount of loan. So bank will sell it as is, where is basis. So these are the bases, these are the premise under which valuation has to be done. So when you are doing it as is, where is basis, highest and the best use will not be used. Then come the orderly liquidation. So in case you have a factory and you are unable to resolve the insolvency, and you are the factory is into companies into liquidation, so one would have to dispose of the assets on piecemeal basis, right? That will be orderly liquidation. You will be selling individual assets and getting the quotes, and based upon the highest bid, you will sell that asset. Forced transaction is something where some covenants are attached, right? For example, in case of restricted stock, you are into a regulatory restriction. So to dispose of that in a particular, you are into a litigation to dispose of through the court judgment. So that is a forced transaction. Valuation in that scenario will be different. These are the valuation premise, basis of valuation. So I have tabulated these in here. Valuation premise. So in case of going concern or liquidation, in case of going concern, value is used for, that is for financial reporting purpose, value to a specific holder. Suppose in case you want to acquire some asset, you may be willing to pay extra over and above. For example, you might have heard of Patanjali has acquired recently, few months back, Ruchi Soya. So they paid 5,000 crore for that acquisition, and however the valuation was much less. Why they paid? Because they were forcing that they can utilize their facilities in a best way, and they foresee that their future projected cash flows are higher than anyone else. So that is called user specific, participant specific valuation. Value in exchange, in case of acquisition or business combination, discops, right? That is used for fair value reporting. In case you acquire something, so you would have to compute the swap ratio. So that is there as a going concern that is used. In case of liquidation, again, it is an orderly or forced one. For orderly, when you are selling it on a piecemeal basis to the participants and whosoever bids highest, that is fair value, on the basis of fair value. In case there are some restriction attached to it, so that will be forced one. Right? I hope I made you clear. So let's move on. We will now start with the fair value measurement. That is purely Ind AS 113. I made you clear the basis of the premise. Now you will be able to understand the fair value measurement better. So fair value measurement Ind AS 113, this talks about the fair value, and it establishes a framework for measuring the fair value, how to measure the fair value. And it talks about the disclosure of about the fair value measurement. That's it. So this standard do not have an overriding effect over other standard. This standard do not say that which asset and liabilities has to be fair valued. Wherever other standards say that something is to be fair valued, you have to come to this standard 113 and determine how to do fair value and what are the disclosure for fair value. So as defined by Ind AS, fair value is the price that would be received to sell an asset and paid to transfer a liability. It is based on exit price notion. Suppose you purchase something, now you want to sell something. So at what price you will be able to sell that particular item will be the fair value, right? We will talk about this in detail in an orderly transaction. Orderly transaction should not be forced one, should not be under should not be a duress sale or something like that. We will talk about that. And between the market participants, who are market participant, what are market, we will talk about that. And at a measurement date here means reporting date. Whenever you are doing financial reporting in your financial statement, as on end of each quarter, in case you are you have to file the quarterly financial statement, so that would be your measurement date. So fair value is market based measurement, not an entity specific. It is a market based. You cannot come up with your valuation. You first have to go to the market and assess the fair value. We will talk about that. I will make you understand. And it is on the basis of the assumption that market participant would use and in their best economic interest, and including the risk assumption. So in case of you are valuing the future discounted cash flow, so discount rate should be driven by the market. I will make you understand in my coming slides. So all this slide you will understand. And it should entity intention to hold an asset or settle or otherwise fulfill a liability is not at all relevant. For example, suppose I have investment in debt. I may classify some investment as held to maturity, some as trading, some as available for sale. Their treatment will be different. So in case of trading, it will straight away go to P&L, MTM will go to P&L. In case of AFS, MTM will go to OCI, and HTM will be at amortized cost. So their treatment in our financial statement is totally different. But if I am valuing all these categories, my fair value, suppose I have Tata Motors share. So Tata Motors share, some shares I have classified as HTM, AFS or trading. Valuation for all the share will be same, right? Intention is irrelevant. Then this is the exclusion from the fair value, because we have separate standard for share-based payment, leases, inventories, impairment, AS 36 for employees' benefits. This for calculating the recoverable amount. So how fair value is calculated there? So it is a bit differently. Recoverable amount is fair value less cost of disposal or a value in use, whichever is higher. So these are the specific standards, and you have to follow that in these scenarios. So now coming back to the definition, what is orderly transaction? Transaction that is usual and customary, right? It should not be forced one. It should not be a duress sale. It should not be under coercion. When a transaction is not orderly, when you have inadequate exposure, when you have a single market participant, only one person, one-on-one dealing is happening, or other parties are not there to give their bids. So it will not be an orderly. Seller is under insolvency or bankruptcy. Transaction price is an outlier. Suppose in general market is transacting at 100 and I say my investment is 200. So my transaction is at 200. So that will not be the case. That will not be treated as orderly. So fair value measurement. I will talk about market, principal market, and most advantageous market here. So for measuring the fair value, entity should take into account the characteristic, condition, and location. For example, during this COVID time, you want to sell your car and it is lying somewhere in Bangalore and you are in Delhi. So would you be able to sell that car? No, you will have to bring that car to Delhi, because suppose the market is there in Delhi, buyer is there in Delhi. So condition and location of the assets and restriction attached to it. So in case of some regulatory restriction, in case of some litigation, so you will have to take into account while valuing the asset. Fair value measurement assumes that the transaction takes place in the principal market. And in the absence of principal market, most advantageous market. So what is principal market? Let us understand. The market with the greatest volume and level of activity of asset or liability. Market with the greatest volume. Let's take an example here. So we have a stock X that is getting traded in market A and market B. In price in market A is 20 and price is in market B is 22. Ideally, I should use market B price because the market B price is higher, but it says greatest volume and level of activity. So greatest volume in that market A, we have 2 lakh, average trade per day. In market B, we have 50,000. So we would have to go with market A, right? Market A here will become the principal market. Now you would say, what if in case we have almost more or similar level of activity in both the market? So in that case, if you are unable to identify the principal market, you will have to go to the most advantageous market. Most advantageous market is the market that maximizes the amount that would be received to sell an asset or minimize the amount for liabilities, taking into account the transaction cost and the transport cost. Now, in my example, let's take stock X. In market A is 31 and in market B it is 30. Average trade is more or less same. Transaction cost in market A and market B is 3 and 1 respectively. Transportation cost. Transaction cost is, suppose you want to sell a property and you have to pay the registration charge, that is transportation cost is you have to bring your commodity product in the market to make it fit and usable, saleable condition. So in this case, net price, if I reduce transaction cost and transportation cost, it comes out to be 23 in market A and 24 in market B. Now, market B price is higher after adjusting the transportation and transaction cost. So market B will become the most advantageous market. Clear? Now, what would be the fair value in this case? So let's compute the fair value. While computing the fair value, one will take into account the transportation cost, not the transaction cost. Why? Because fair value computation is just hypothetical. We are not going to sell. We are just reporting in our books of accounts. So when we will talk about the fair value disclosure, you will get to know. Transportation cost is something you are making it fit for use, like you are bringing it to the market if it is if something is required to make it in a sellable condition, that is transportation cost. So that is adjusted. So in the same example, price was 31 and 30, average trade was same, transaction cost and transportation. So net price for determining the advantageous market is 23 in market A and 24 in market B. Market B will become the most advantageous market. And for fair value reporting purposes, I will not take into account the transaction cost. I will take into account 30 minus 5. That would be 25. So market B value 25 will be the reported fair value, and for determining it will be 24, right? At the time of, now you will say at the time of initial recognition, suppose the valuation is less and I have paid because I foresee future economic benefits are higher and I have paid initially higher price. So at the time of initial recognition, you have to take the transaction price, entry price as the fair value. And subsequently, after at each reporting date, you will assess the fair value and make adjustment. So in this acquisition case, entry price. Now, when the transaction price might not represent the fair value, when the transaction may be in between related party, when it is a duress or forced sale, when in case of a business combination, when you have acquired a business as a whole, you might not be able to identify because purchase price allocation will be there. So goodwill has to be allocated over all the assets and liabilities. You might not be able to identify the transaction price for individual assets and liabilities. And market in which transaction take place is not the principal market. Suppose you want to sell a property and you did not went to multiple brokers and you just went to one buyer and sold the property. So that transaction will not constitute the fair value. That will be a user specific value. So you have to do the transaction in either principal market or most advantageous market. Now, let us understand highest and the best use, because this is the premise for India's 113. We would be using this premise for valuation. So it is applicable for non-financial assets, and it takes into account the participant ability to generate future economic benefit. It takes into account the ability to generate. Whether you are generating is right now or not is not relevant. Your ability to generate economic benefit. If you have the ability, then you have to do the highest and the best use. For example, you have an office building and you have a 10-story building. You are using only 2 or 3 stories, rest all are idle. But in future, you have plan of expansion. Then you have future expansion plan. So while valuing that particular office premises, you will take into account the entire building, not just the 3 floors. So you will presume as if you are using the entire building. You may have let out that building, or you may be earning rental income. So you will consider that. So, however, it should be physically possible. The building should be such that it should be physically possible to set up an office there. Legally permissible. There should not be some litigation or some kind of restriction by the regulatory authorities. It should be financially feasible. It should not be in a shabby state where you have to invest much to make it into fit for use. So in case of a fair value reporting, in your financial statement, if the highest and the best use of non-financial asset differ from its current use, for example, you are not using the entire building, you are using only the 3 floors. So in your financial statement, you have to report that why you are not using that building, whether you have plan for future expansion, and whether you are planning to let off that building. So you have to, in your financial reporting, you have to tell your investor that why you are not using your particular asset. Now, fair value hierarchy. So fair value hierarchy, India has defined assets and liabilities to be classified into three levels: level 1, 2, and 3. So level 1 and 2 is market observable. So it define the hierarchy: 1 as market observable, 2 as again market observable but slight adjustment, and level 3 as unobservable. So before we go to hierarchy, let us understand what are observable and unobservable inputs. So observable inputs are that which are developed using the market data which is publicly available. Suppose you have Maruti share, so that is traded on stock exchange, so you can easily, anyone can easily get. So if I am holding Maruti share and someone else is also holding Maruti share, so we both will value in our books at the same price, that is market observable. Another example is implied volatility. So that will come to level 3. In case of implied volatility is something is the market expectation of future change in the prices of stock. So that is again driven by the market and is observable. Anyone can see. So observable input is something which everybody, all the participant can notice. Unobservable input is that is not available in the market, where you have used your own technique, own approach to arrive at the valuation. For example, you have shares of an unlisted company, and there is no similar company listed in stock exchange, no EBITDA multiple, no PE multiple. So in that case, you will value that particular investment. Suppose the equity method investment is there, so you will value that investment based upon your internal model. You will assess the projection, future projection, and you will identify a certain discount rate, loss severity rate you will identify, and then you will discount using that discount rate and arrive at the fair value, right? That is, so this, in this case, unobservable input valuation will differ from for different market participant. I have invested in company, someone else also have invested in the same company. We both may arrive at a different valuation, right? Then comes the hierarchy. So now you will be able to understand it better. Level 1 are input used to measure the fair value that are observable clearly, that are quoted prices. So whatever securities that are listed in stock exchange we will take the prices from the stock exchange directly and will be treated as level 1 item. We are not allowed to make any adjustment in those prices. Suppose I have Tata Motors, so whatever there is in the stock exchange, I would have to take into account in my financial statement. Now level 2 items, again under level 2 also the inputs are observable, but there are certain adjustments. Suppose my company LIC, if I take an example, is not listed, but there are similar companies like LIC which are listed. So if I want to do the valuation of LIC, I will take the basis as some other listed company having the same size, same segment, or into same business, same structure. Take that listed company as the basis, its listed price, and I will make some adjustment for my company to arrive at its valuation. So that will be classified as level 2 because I have basis is market observable and I made some adjustment. Another example is, although your stock is listed in stock exchange but is not frequently traded. Your stock is listed but not frequently traded. So there are negligible transaction. It is fortnightly, it is getting traded. So in that case, you cannot classify it because that is not actively traded in the stock exchange. So that we will classify as level 2. And indirectly observable inputs such as yield curve we can take, that is available publicly. Volatility we have discuss that. Credit spread we can take. For example, credit spread is something like Government of India is giving 6% rate of return, and some other company with less credit rating, suppose Mahindra Finance, is giving 9% return. So that differential is credit spread. So that is available publicly. So if we value our investment using that approach, these credit spread, although my investment is not listed, so I can classify that my investment as level 2. Level 3 is I have used the input which are unobservable, right? I have used my own internal techniques, assumption, and models to arrive at the fair value. So my projection may vary from the projection of other participants. So each one of us will value the same differently. That is why a role of valuers came in. Then comes the valuation approach. So in total, there are 3 valuation approach, and some books have defined market approach, income approach, and asset approach. We can say cost approach as well. So which valuation technique we should use? We should use the valuation technique which maximize the use of observable input. So in case market data is not available, then only we can go to the unobservable techniques. So market approach, at the first instance, we have to use the market approach, then income or cost approach, right? Market approach, you are clear, identical or comparable. Suppose your listed company is there, so that is identical, comparable. Some listed company and your company is not listed, but they are of same dimension, size, structure, and all. So you can compare that and take that price and do some adjustment. So that is market approach. Income approach is discounted cash flow, future economic benefits you are deriving, and cost approach is replacement or reproduction cost. Let's talk about them one by one. So market approach, we will talk about the methods used in these approaches also. So identical or comparable similar assets. So generally market approach is prices quoted on the stock exchange, that is market, and the yield curve, implied volatility, discount, credit spread, and all these are market approach. So there are methods, there are several methods. Most commonly used are market price method. This is prices of the security actively traded in the market. So we may take the weighted average or volume weighted average. We may take volume weighted average, hourly volume weighted average. Suppose my security is volatile and it has jumped high and low during the day. So what I will do, I will, for hourly number of transaction and hourly price, I can take a volume weighted average to arrive at the fair valuation. Then comes the guideline company method, comparable company method. So this is same as listed, comparing with the listed peers. So company is listed and mine is not. So I'll compare that and arrive. Comparable transaction method. So my company is not listed. I may not be able to find the listed peer also. In that case, what I'll do, I'll compare with the EBITDA multiple of that particular industry. Suppose construction industry has some EBITDA multiple, I'll take that as a basis and we'll do some adjustment. I'll take PE multiple of that industry, or I'll identify the PE multiple of similar companies. So that is comparable transaction method, right? That is all market approach. Then comes the income approach. This approach primarily converts the future economic benefits using the discount rate, considering the risk involved, credit risk. So primarily we have discounted cash flow method, then income capitalization, and then several methods for intangible assets. Discounted cash flow, as a chartered accountant, we all are using it. Income capitalization is something you arrive at the average income and divide by the capitalization rate to arrive at the value. Intangible asset valuation, there are several methods such as relief from royalty, with and without method, multi-period excess earning method, distribute. So these methods are used for specific intangible assets. I may not be going into detail in these methods. Then comes the derivative valuation method. So binomial model, Black-Scholes model. So these are used for option pricing when that is how implied volatility comes into picture. So your expectation of future up and down, and you use these models to arrive at the valuation. And there are several methods. One can develop its own method to arrive at. So after Black-Scholes method, there are some versions also got developed later on. Then comes the cost approach. So cost approach is something like in the present scenario at COVID times, you can, let me take an example. So some companies are involved into development of COVID vaccine, right? So one cannot use the income approach because future economic benefits are unknown. You cannot foresee the future. It may not be workable, may get fail. And the market approach, because similar kind of vaccine is not available outside anywhere. Everybody is generating a fresh. So in this case, if you want to value that drug, so you will have to use the cost approach. So in cost approach, we have two methods: reproduction cost and replacement cost. So reproduction is to recreate the replica of the asset, and replacement is to what you have to incur to recreate that asset. So in this particular example, I would have to go with the cost approach. I cannot use the market approach, nor I can use the income approach. Right? These are primarily cost approaches, least commonly used approach. Generally, we use market approach and income approach. These are used for internally generated intangible, where valuation is not available outside. You cannot go to the market. For software, technology, assembled workforce, all these items we use cost approach. Then comes the valuation adjustment. Once you arrive at the value, you will have to do some kind of valuation adjustment to arrive at the net value. So that is discount for lack of marketability. Suppose I have 25-35% in particular company. I may not, and I do not want to hold that investment. I may not be able to sell that 35% at one go. I would have to sell it in parts, right? So marketability is low. If I start selling my investment, the prices will fall down because it will be easily available in the market, and buyers will be less and seller will be more. So in this case, we will have to adjust for discount for lack of marketability. As otherwise, if I have suppose only 2% stake in the company, I may not have substantial influence and control over the company. So someone holding 50% will have influence. So I will, while valuing my stake, I will have to adjust for discount for lack of control, right? There are n number of adjustments. You can have your own adjustment also based upon the scenario or circumstances, like tax concession if you have during this COVID time. So DTL and DTA, those have come into picture. ESOP calculation also you can do adjustment. Strike price you have to compute, so you have to do some kind of adjustment in your value. Auditor qualification, you have valued using income approach and arrive at a value, and then you see the auditor disqualification in their annual report or some due diligence finding, so you may have to adjust the valuation. For COVID-19, because lack of marketability, there are less number of transactions, so you may have to adjust the valuation on account of COVID-19 also. So then let's talk about the disclosures. So disclosure required depends upon recurring and non-recurring fair value measurements. So first, before we go into disclosure, we need to understand what is recurring and non-recurring. So recurring fair value measurement is for those assets and liabilities which are required to be reported at fair value at each reporting date. That means, for example, available for sale investment are required to be reported at fair value. You purchase those investment, and at reporting date you will have to adjust MTM and put that MTM into OCI. So available for sale investment are required to be valued at fair value at each reporting date. So that is recurring. Non-recurring is something which on happening of some trigger, like such as impairment, classification change from suppose you have a loan, you are a banking company, you have a loan and you do not want to hold that loan account and you want to dispose of that loan, you will classify that loan account as held for sale because you do not intend to hold that loan and you want to sell that, dispose of within 1 year. You will classify that as held for sale. So in that case, you will have to report that piece of loan as loan held for sale and do fair value for that. So that is non-recurring. Otherwise, it is reported at cost, but due to happening of some certain events, you have to report that at fair value. For example, goodwill impairment of any of your asset. So that will be non-recurring. How fair value measurement developed? First, before going into disclosure, we need to understand how fair value measurement developed. So historically, what companies were showing, this is the picture, balance sheet. So they were showing the investment for current year and the corresponding year. And in notes to accounts for investment, they were showing the breakup of those investment. This is happening if you are an auditor or you are preparing the financial statement of a company, small company, less than 250 crore of net worth, which are not using the Ind AS, rather using AS. So this is how the financial statement looks like. The breakup of investment into category of investment. Suppose for I have investment in company A, and in 2009 I have valued 250 crore. Some other company also might have the same amount of investment, same shares. They may be showing that as 400. So suddenly the investment. So the regulator then come up with the leveling initially, right? They say, provide us the breakup of this investment 2,500 crore into level 1, 2, and 3. So they say level 1 listed, level 2 market observable, again level 3 unlisted. Then this was also not solving the purpose. Then they come up with the level detail activity of level 3 item. So most of the companies were showing their investment under level 3. They said, provide us the breakup of this level 3 investment from the opening balance movement into P&L and OCI earnings, sale purchase, or transfer to other category within movement within level 1, 2, and 3. Then this was also not resolving the purpose. Then regulators come up with the additional detail. So they come up with they ask for the valuation technique. What valuation techniques you are using to arrive at the fair value. Suppose for level 3, you are using the discounted cash flow. So tell us that you are using the discounted cash flow. Unobservable input, you are using the discount rate. Tell us what discount rate you are using. You have number of assets in that category. Provide us the range of that unobservable inputs. Provide us the weighted average of that. Provide us the sensitivity analysis for a particular movement in the unobservable input. Suppose you have moved the discount rate from 8 to 10%. What would be the impact on the valuation? Provide us that. So this is how it developed. So now coming to the disclosure. So first of all, you have to disclose the fair value hierarchy, level 1, 2, and 3 for recurring. Recurring, we understand. We have to fair value at each reporting date, right? So we have to give the hierarchy. Then we have to give the transfer between level 1 and 2, movement between 1 and 2. Then for level 3, we have to give a reconciliation. We have discussed that, the activity. Then valuation techniques, what valuation techniques we have used. Then sensitivity analysis. Then transfer within level 3 or out of level 3. Then for non-recurring, we have to give the hierarchy. Non-recurring are those which are either impaired or are classified as held for sale. So significant unobservable input for for in case these non-recurring are level 2 or 3. So unobservable input that are used under level 3, you have to report that as well. And for all the asset, if I talk about IFRS 9, Ind AS 109, that says financial instrument has to be reported even at amortized cost, then fair value has to be disclosed, reported for that as well. So for all financial instrument, one has to report the fair value as well as the hierarchy. Let me show you the practical financial statement. So I'll show you the financial statement for HSBC Bank and how they are presenting these fair value. So this is the extract from the HSBC financial statement. So this is notes to accounts, fair value measurement, footnote, notes to account. And see, this is how they have shown the fair value on recurring basis. So asset and liability recorded at fair value on recurring basis. So for these level 1, 2, and 3, netting is only applicable in US. So under IFRS, netting is not there. This is something related to derivative netting. And so this is how they have disclosed level 1, 2, and 3. And for this has to be disclosed for corresponding period. And for level 3, if you see, for let's take a particular item, this corporate and other domestic debt security level 3, 510, right? If I scroll down, 510 will be the closing balance. 510 is the closing balance, and we will have to provide the walk from what has happened since the beginning of the year till the end of the year. So at the beginning of the year, 1803 was the opening balance, and we have disposed of something 1293, and 510 is the closing balance. So this is the activity for only for level 3. Only for level 3 items, we have to give the entire activity, what has happened. Then for the corresponding period as well, we have to give the activity. Then this is the unobservable inputs that we have used to arrive at the fair value for level 3. So 510 corporate and other domestic debt security, we have used the discounted cash flows and volatility on collateral assets. That is the range of input. This weighted average is not applicable because we have only one asset under this item. So for some other line item, you may see the range and weighted average as well, right? For interest rate derivative contract, you can see the weighted average and as well as range. This is how that is presented in the financial statement. Then for the corresponding year, then this sensitivity analysis for change in the valuation, unobservable input, percentage change in the unobservable input, what would be the impact on valuation. This is the non-recurring valuation. So residential mortgage held for sale or otherwise impaired items, or we have to give the level hierarchy on non-recurring basis corresponding, and again unobservable input for level 3 items. Then this is a financial instrument. So this is the disclosure about financial instrument. These are those items which are not generally carried at fair value. fair value, these are carried at cost. However, for all the financial instrument, we would have to disclose the fair value as well as the fair value hierarchy. For HTM security, these are carried at amortized cost. So, but we have to report the fair value and the level hierarchy for this. So that was all about the disclosure. Then this is the table I have, so you can go through. I'll share the slides with you. You can go through this table. This depicts which all disclosure are required for recurring, non-recurring, and other financial instruments. Then finally, let's talk about the COVID impact on fair value reporting. So COVID. Yeah, Sumit, were you trying to say something?
Ji Karun ji.
You are you saying something?
Your voice is so clear. Sorry again.
Okay, no issue. Shall I continue? Or
Yeah. You can continue with this.
I am left with couple of slides, so I'll be winding up.
Yeah. Please cover it.
10 minutes. Okay, so the COVID impact on fair value measurements. So first of all, let's talk about on fair value hierarchy. What will be the impact on fair value hierarchy? COVID-19 may impact the classification of fair value hierarchy. How that will impact the classification? Suppose my stock was earlier listed and was actively traded. Now, due to COVID, trading is low. So due to inactivity, I may have to classify my investment as level 2. Earlier, I was classifying as level 1 due to inactivity in the market. Company may need to make adjustment to the observable inputs also. In case of Domino's, what I have seen that in the month of February, late February, they have announced sudden hiring due to this COVID. They needed extra manpower to deliver the pizzas. So they issued advertisement for hirings, and suddenly the Domino's pizzas price went up, share price went up drastically, like 20% hike, sudden hike. So I may not consider that hike into account. So these kind of unnatural circumstances due to COVID, I may have to adjust that. Company may have planned to replace an observable input with company would have to replace the observable because observable inputs are either not relevant or not available in the market. Suppose yield curve, I was earlier relying upon the yield curve market expectation. Now market is, you know what is happening in the market. So I may not be able to get the observable inputs from the market. So I may have to use my own models or technique. So it will be difficult for me to assess the future cash flow as well. For investment which are not active but valued using observable input, additional scrutiny may be required. Right, actively not traded in the market. Earlier, I was using the yield curve. Now, yield curve is flat. We are not sure about how it will go. What will be the difference in the short term and the long term interest rate? So, we will have to be put some extra scrutiny on that. Company may need to use different inputs or source. Like earlier, I was able to use the discount rate easily. Now it will become difficult for me to use the discount rate. What should be the discount rate? What should be the credit risk involved? Difficulty in assessment. So that would be the challenge here. Company may need to assess whether the transaction represent orderly one or not. Suppose people have lined up to sell a particular stock and the sellers are there in the market, no buyers. So automatically share price will go down. So I may not be able to assess the value considering that may would not be orderly. Right, some kind of announcement, some layoff announced by the company. So some layoffs are there. They are not able to utilize their resources. So these things, if they are there, so I would have to face these challenges and make some adjustment in my valuation. I am using the standard approaches, and then I would have to adjust my valuation to arrive at the fair value. Then Challenges faced due to COVID-19. So as I said, there would be issue in forecasting the future cash flows. I am not sure at this point of time whether I would be able to run my factory or not. I would be able to generate future cash flows or not. Will I be able to get loan to continue my business operations or not? So uncertainty is there. Difficulty in selection of valuation method. Which valuation method to choose from? There are, if earlier I was using 2 or 3 methods, I may not be able to apply all the methods. Some method might be giving negative worth, right? So which method? So I would have to choose that. Assumptions, again, credit spread, again, so the interest has gone down for the debt as well. Government is continuously reducing the interest rate, so it has become difficult. If I have stock, suppose I have a bond and I have contractually agreed, I have a Mahindra Finance bond and that was at 9%. So now the interest rate are reducing. So credit spread is going high. Spread is high and I may not be able to arrive at the correct valuation. Difficulty obtaining the comparable data. So comparable data may not be available, right? Other companies are also not performing well. Their EBITDA multiple also have gone down. Dormant stock, unusual fluctuations are there. I may not be able to assess in that. Difficulty in making the adjustment for DLOM. So marketability. At this point of time, I am unable to assess the marketability of my security. Maybe I foresee that in future I will be the intrinsic value is high, but at this point of time, because valuation is something date specific, what is the value at this point of time? So I may not be able to make this adjustment. Difficulty assessing the COVID relief impact. Government have come up with various relief measures such as reduced interest loan. So what would be the impact for that? So I would have to take into account that also while valuing a company. That's all I have. Sumitji, over to you.
Thank you, Karunji, for your wonderful deliberation. Chandni, if you have any query, you can ask.
Yes, so Sumitji and Karunji, we have one query on the live chat as well. So first, if you can entertain this query. So Mr. Thangaswamy is asking, what are the specific challenges before the valuers during COVID-19 crisis?
Challenges were primarily for unlisted companies. Listed company, we generally were easily getting the quote, so there are implied volatility in case of derivative valuation and all. Market was stable, right? So earlier for listed company, we were able to value easily. But challenge was for unlisted company or for startup companies, loss-making companies, we find difficult to value them. So we would have to thoroughly understand that right now at this point of time, suppose I would have to value a software company, I may not be value that correctly at this point of time because COVID impact. I may not be assess the future economic benefits because the market is unstable and nobody, not just me, nobody can value a particular company correctly at this point of time because we do not know till what time this pandemic will continue. Earlier also we were having difficulty getting the comparables of unlisted companies. So right now there are a number of software companies that have come up with these databases. So FundTQ is one of them. You can go to those companies and you can easily get the comparables. But as an individual, if I have to value, I may not be willing to spend much to get those access to those softwares. So that is what the challenge is.
Okay, thanks a lot. I hope the query has been resolved. One question I do have. So my question is, since we do not consider transaction cost in the principal market,
Right.
But we do consider transportation cost in principal market as well as the post advantages.
Yes.
So what is the principle, what is the logic behind not considering transaction cost?
See, Chandni, suppose you have half cooked rice, right? You won't be able to sell that rice in the market.
Yeah.
Whatever the taxes are there on, when you sell those, there is GST on that. So if you are planning to sell your rice, so you would have to complete those rice, right? That should be in a saleable condition. So that is why transaction cost is considered and not the transportation cost is considered and not the transaction cost, because we are just doing the fair value. We are not actually selling. So that is, transaction cost is hypothetical. But for a particular asset, we have to make that asset as a saleable, in a saleable condition. Then only we would be able to sell. That is why we are adjusting the transportation cost.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I guess all the queries have been resolved. It was thanks a lot, Karunji. It was very insightful presentation. This topic is very unique and not everyone discuss it, but it was a very useful and it was very lively presentation as well. So thanks a lot for this amazing presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Chandni, and thank you, Sumitji.
Thank you all.
Sumitji,
And thank you, Karunji and Chandni ji, for joining today and making very interactive session. And tomorrow, thanks to all viewers. And tomorrow we are joining for FEMA webinar at 11:30 and evening derivative and hedge accounting at the rate 5 p.m. So thank you very much to each one of you. Thank you, Karunji, for your wonderful deliberation.
Thank you.
And thank you, Chandni, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.